At this point, I want to invite another of our presenters for this morning, or rather this afternoon, to take us on cyber intelligence as a tool for enhancing national security. Tanwa Ashiru, the founder of Bulwark Intelligence Solution, a top enterprise security risk management company in Africa, and is a fellow of the Association of Enterprise Risk Management Professionals. Tanwa is a U.S. Air Force veteran and has over 18 years of experience in intelligence analysis. She worked in the U.S. Department of Defense and the U.S. National Security Agency. She served 180 days in Afghanistan and was involved in counterinsurgency, counter-IED, and counter-terrorism and operations in Southwest Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, here at the hall, I present to you Tanwa Ashiru.
Got it. Great. So that was a fantastic presentation. And the entire time, I was so confused. I kept staring at you. I know you had these amazing slides, but I was just wondering, I said, where is he from? He's dressed like a nonana. He has a Yoruba name. He's speaking pidgin like a Wari man. And then at the end of it, now spoke other languages. I don't know. So you were just a delight and an enigma that I will try to understand later. Thank you, sir. So I'm going to go very quickly. I do have a lot of information, but I know our time is very limited here, so I'm going to go very, very fast. The topic today is cyber intelligence as a tool for enhancing national security. Now, in order to effectively tackle this topic, I thought it was important to unpack the title and look at them individually. So I'm going to start by examining sort of national security first and really what that means, because that also plays into what effects the cyber threats have. We're also going to look at cyber threat intelligence. I know a lot of the sponsors here, when they're talking about their product, a lot of them touched about cyber threat intelligence. And we're also going to consider, talk about what do we consider as national security cyber threats. And finally, then we'll discuss how cyber intelligence can serve as a tool for enhancing national security. Now, what is national security? Nations today consider anything that threatens the physical well-being of its citizen or jeopardizes its stability as a national security threat. So national security, when you hear it, I know automatically what comes to mind is military. You think about bandits, you think about kidnappers, that's national security. But it can be both kinetic and non-kinetic as well, which means both violent, non-violent, military, non-military. So sometimes some nations kind of break it down into like political security, for example, which has to do with the protection of the sovereignty of that government. So you don't have unlawful interference from foreign entities or internal or external threats. Then you also have economic security, which is really the protection of the capacity of the economy to provide for the people in that country. You have homeland security. Mr. Ajijola talked about that quite a bit. And it involves the provision of domestic security. So this is what, the part that we're all talking about, things with airport, port security, border security, transportation, immigration enforcement, all that stuff. Environmental security, that has more to do with like conflicts, border issues that we tend to have, water shortages, energy disruptions, climate change. And then human security, today that kind of looks more like the protection of people from hunger, disease, repression, and then food security, health security, protection of women and minorities. And then cyber security, which we all know, which is the protection of the governments and the people's computer and data from harm. And so today, most countries use the digital space for all sorts of things. And as you can see, if you're going to provide any of these security, almost all of them here involve cyber. Cyber, the digital space is very involved today in the provision of homeland security and economic security and all that. So cyber threats really are very, very key. Now, governments realize that the internet have become crucial to global commerce and communication, but even more so, it's their own national security and economic prosperity. A lot of that is now tied to cyber. So today, most nations will sit up when they experience anything that can harm their security or their economic interests. Okay, and unfortunately, that's what they're now seeing. A lot of cyber attacks are doing that. Now, the U.S., for example, is very wary of cyber threats that target sort of their economic, their economy, their financial services, energy, transportation, military advantage. So anything that takes away from the military advantage, they're very wary about that. And then now, recently, they're wary about the political interference. It hasn't always been that way. They thought the democracy was really strong until the recent elections and just the division and the role that cyber and social media played in that. Countries such as China, on the other hand, really focuses more on the political aspect. It's about the government, what the government wants, and making sure that nothing is threatening that. Also the economic aspect, and then social stability, upholding those norms and that they, upholding the norms that they value. Now, the point here really is that most global countries consider cyber threats anything that affects their economy, their political systems, and the stability of their countries. Nigeria, I know I have us there, but we're looking mostly at the political interference and national sovereignty. And let me explain that. The government is not as concerned about cyber theft of intellectual property or national secrets. It's not really the major concern here for now. They're not as worried about cyber attacks on critical national infrastructure. Oil pipelines are already getting attacked. They don't need cyber criminals for that. Right? National grid is already getting attacked. It's collapsing by itself. Nobody is even attacking it. Oil pipelines, obviously, we know what's going on. Transportation infrastructure, bandits, kidnappers, whoever, they're already attacking the trains and all that. Things are being vandalized. So if you're in the West, any harm to these things I just mentioned, for them is a critical national security, issue. But for us here, not necessarily. Now, threats that do receive a priority here in Nigeria are things that have to do with anything that stabilizes the government, any threats against the government, threats to topple the government always receive priority attention. Any threats to the harmony of this wonderful amalgamation of Nigeria that we have, those also receive top priority. And the Nigerian government recognizes that cyber is now playing a role in these two areas I just mentioned, especially the social media, more of what social media is doing. So the spread of fake news and other deceptive information campaigns aimed at inciting tribal, ethnic, and or religious conflict is a major, for them, that's like priority number one. And you'll find that when you think about it that way, then you might begin to understand why a lot of focus, there's that pressure to do more in the space of cyber, especially on the economic impact, is not really there. Now, interestingly, most cyber attacks which occur against national African nations are not a direct threat to national security. They mostly target individuals and businesses. And like I said, this might be part of the reason why the federal government's response to cyber threats is not as aggressive and urgent. Now, Interpol released this African Cyber Threat Assessment Report just last year, and they indicated that these are the 5 prominent cyber crimes that tend to occur on the internet. And if you look at it, how many of it is really national security related? Online scams, so phishing, mass mailing, social engineering, that was the top one. Digital extortion, blackmail, and this is where that, digital and cyber awareness comes in, because people, think they can start doing all sorts of nonsense and posting nonsense, and then it comes back to bite them. Business email compromise, again, with COVID, a lot of companies have now really switched 100% virtual, and so that really exposed them and increased BEC attacks. Ransomware, 61% of companies across the continent were affected by ransomware just in 2020. So that's huge. And then botnets, a lot of victim detections have been identified here across Nigeria. So where countries see increased attacks against their private sector and individual citizens as a national security concern It's not necessarily the same over here. So it's important. I think one of the roles that CSHON also now has to do with regards to speaking to the federal government is really helping them understand that, yes, it might not be directly attacking the sovereignty of Nigeria and, threats of war and all that. However, if you're attacking individuals and businesses, it is affecting the money, and that's equally important. Now, very quickly, I just want to discuss here cyber threat intelligence. Yes. Now, pretty much, intel analysis is what I've always done. It's what we do. Now, when you take raw data and you evaluate it, you analyze it, that resultant product you have is what they call intelligence. So really, that's just the difference between just regular information and intelligence. Intel is cyber threat intelligence is what cyber threat information becomes once you've collected it, you've evaluated it, especially making sure that it's coming from the right source, it's reliable information, analyzed through rigorous structured tradecraft techniques. Now, Intel analysts have what we call structured analytical techniques, SATs. And it's so crucial and critical. It's a way of thinking. They literally have to be trained on how to think so that your personal biases are not affecting your eventual intelligence analysis that you're coming out with. So it has to go through all that process, and then that's really what you get as Intel. And intelligence analysis is a cycle. So it starts with a request from a stakeholder, and then, which is what we call the direction phase. I don't know why. Okay, there we go. The direction phase. So it starts with that request from a stakeholder, and then then it goes to a collection manager, who then determines, okay, what's the best way to gather this information that's been requested. And then once they have it, it's processed in a usable format, it's rigorously analyzed, and then disseminated to the original requester. Now, it's a cycle. So what that means is that sometimes the end report actually then shows you more of what you don't know, which is what we call intelligence gaps. So it then reveals more intelligence gaps. Now, let me give you sort of an application example. Say the NSA has an intelligence requirement, and he wants to identify all government websites that have been defaced, okay, so that they can let the organizations know that their websites have been defaced. So he reaches out to the collection manager, and they start developing a collection plan. Where do we gather that information? Where can we get that sort of information from? So once they're done, once they figured it out, they gather the intel. They obviously have to analyze all that good information. And then in the process of doing that, they're analyzing, they've processed it, they then notice that there's been a significant uptick in defaced websites, okay? So, I'm not sure where I'm supposed to be pointing to. Here? Okay. All right, they now realize that there's been a significant uptick in defaced websites. And of course, if you see something like that, what's the first question that comes to your mind? Why? Okay, that's the first intelligence gap. And so in analyzing that, it further reveals that the increase is due to printer server defacement. So again, further questions. Why is that happening? So you're going to ask yourself, who are the actors? Who's defacing these printer servers? Are they part of the same group? Are they exploiting a specific vulnerability? And these are questions that then come up. All right. And so at the end of the day, they're going to come up with an intelligence report. And that report then warns not just of the defaced websites, but then also any kind of trends they've noticed, any kind of vulnerabilities that they've also seen. Okay, so this is just going through that intel cycle. I'm just kind of putting you through what cyber threat intelligence is all about. Okay. All right, and so what is the benefit, really? Cyber threat intelligence will assist in shedding more insight on crime, cybercrime actors, their intents, their capabilities, and it will allow for more informed decision making. This is what in Intel we refer to as a decision advantage. It means you're able to make a decision from an advantageous point of view. You have insight, okay? And cyber threat intelligence is beneficial to all level of consumers. So on the strategic intel level, you're thinking more high-level briefings. It's for decision makers, policy makers. Your cyber threat intelligence reports are actually able to inform them on trends and things that would inform long-term issues. We also have operational intelligence, which assesses specific operational incidents and helps provide sort of guidance on how you can respond. And then tactical, obviously, which is more of the real-time events and day-to-day operational support. So when properly applied, cyber threat intelligence can provide greater insight into threats, which allows you to respond faster, which allows for more resource development and allocation. We talked about money. Money is an issue. The good thing about Intel and what Intel does for you is it shows you exactly where the issues are so you can direct your funds there and not just blanket spending it everywhere. So challenges with improving cyber threat intelligence. Now, there are several challenges on this matter, especially when you bring it here and bring it home. Number one, the playing field is not even. Digital literacy is still very low. In fact, many of the government agencies that have been identified as the stakeholders for implementing some of these cybersecurity policies, they themselves are in need of cybersecurity awareness. I mean, think about it. So I deal with enterprise security risk management. Today, it's pretty much a lot of what we call CSOs, chief security officers, that now realize that in order for them to do their jobs better as CSOs, they now need to understand information, technology, data, because that's also the company's assets. And so in doing that, they're more aware. So your typical chief security officer is not just dealing with just guards. Now he needs to understand sort of the cyber risks and threats that are out there. However, the challenge we have here in Nigeria is that they put private security under NSCDC. And I don't know about you, but NSCDC themselves don't really know a whole lot about private security. And so that fight is ongoing nonstop. And what they keep saying is, how are you, who barely knows anything, how many of you have those sort of international certifications and so on? They don't have it, but you're supposed to be regulating me. And so that's a challenge. So again, it's what we're saying. Just because one agency is really good, I know everyone talks about CBN and this amazing fusion center they have, but that's just one agency. And it doesn't help if you don't have others that are all operating on that same level playing field. So, and I don't know, I'm sure most of you heard about that, the cyber attack on Target that happened years ago. It was so devastating, cost them over $200 million. It was horrible. But Target, the company themselves, were actually really, really good with cyber. The attackers couldn't get to Target directly, so they went through their vendor. So again, it boils down to, it's not good enough that, okay, all of us here are good with cyber, but then, okay, what about your daughter and then she has access to your phone? Or your son and he has access to your laptop? Completely ruins everything. So that's one. The next thing too is that technology required for implementation requires, okay, yes, so the actual yes. The technology required for implementation is still lacking. Now, when I was growing up, they would take lights, and when they brought lights, we all shout, "Up NEPA!" I never in a million years thought that I would be grown and I would hear my own children also shouting, "Up!" They don't even call it "Up NEPA" now. They just say, "Yay!" and run and grab their tablets and whatnot. I mean, but really, in this day and age, they're still taking lights. And we want to sit here and talk about, oh, we need 24/7 cyber infrastructure. It's a problem, okay? And really, cyber criminals themselves operate 24/7 power infrastructure. They do that. And yet, some of our own agencies are not even able to afford that right now. And obviously, the attackers, all they need is just that little vulnerability. An attacker just needs to coordinate the attack. In fact, in 2008, a cyber gang had extracted $9.8 million from a US bank, and they did it during a weekend, during a holiday. So the point here is that let's just look for where that vulnerability is, that downtime, and that's when they're going after you. So that's an issue. The infrastructure is still lacking. Next, political will. I know Mr. Ajijola mentioned it as well. Evidence suggests that political will is necessary to drive long-term policy making. All right, and changes in government is always an issue. We don't know if the priorities of the new government will be the same. Say, for example, that this current government has been really big on cyber and they want to move things forward, and that's good. But who's to say that the next government that comes in is going to be looking at the same thing and put cyber at the same forefront? So just that continuity is lacking, that leadership is lacking, and it's just one of the issues that we still have. Limited funds and resources. Again, Mr. Jujula mentioned that earlier. Implementing cybersecurity solutions is costly. And one of the sponsors here that spoke, the ones that spoke first, ISAT, right? I mean, he was talking about all these amazing things and 100 million customers and 40 million something. I need to talk to this guy, except when they give me invoice now, I'll run away. It's not cheap, right? So installing the right tools, if you want the real, we know we've sourced and we've looked for some really strong intelligence, OSINT, open source intelligence tools that some of the government agencies here can use. They are not cheap. So these are some of the barriers that would affect effective cyber threat intelligence implementation. Okay? And does Nigeria value cybersecurity enough to prioritize it, especially as the economy, not just here, but the global economy, and we're feeling that pressure, is going into this decline and recession? Trust issues. Trust is a major problem. The Nigerian Cyber Crime Act, okay, has a section there that says, what does it say? It says, okay, any person that operates a computer or any kind of, network and so on, if they're attacked, they must report it to the NG-CERT, the Coordination Center. How many of you here know of any attacks that are being reported? It doesn't happen. We have trust issues. Kaspersky came out with a report that was last year. I'm sure a lot of you heard about it. And it showed that Nigeria had a significant increase in cyber attacks compared to our other peers across Africa. So Ethiopia was number 2, South Africa was number 3. Kenya's own actually reduced, but ours actually went up. Yet people are not reporting this thing. Again, the 2020 Sophos report indicated that 86% of Nigerian organizations had suffered cyber attacks in the last 12 months when they had done the assessment. And in 2019, another report revealed that Nigeria lost 649 million to cyber crimes. How many of these things were actually reported? Barely. So still on trust issues, it's a major issue. We're not reporting them. Also, cyber attacks tend to be treated in secrecy these days. In fact, they say some companies in Nigeria are known to intimidate, sue, or threaten to arrest researchers or people that discover any kind of vulnerabilities. Why? Because the management says, look, if you disclose this, it will affect my stocks. If you disclose this, it will affect my credibility within my board. So they won't even want it to come out at all. And so even small-scale attacks are still not reported, and that is an issue because if we're going to tackle this cyber threat, we need this reporting so that we understand what's going on. Okay? So what's the way forward? What do we do? Improving digital literacy. I know it's something we say it all the time. I love what Sean is doing. I think what's her name was here earlier when she gave her presentation. All the visits they're doing, all the presentations they're doing, please keep at it. It's necessary, it's helpful. Again, we are increasing our participation in this digital domain. It's going to increase. There's going to be more and more. COVID has caused full-time work from home. Gen Z, they don't even believe in office anymore. Forget it. This is their office anywhere. WFA is what it's called, work from anywhere. So and then right now, broadband penetration in Nigeria is only at 35%. Do you reckon that's going to increase or decrease in the next coming years? It's definitely going to go up. So we definitely have to keep pushing that and keep pushing for more digital literacy. People need to understand, individuals and businesses especially, because they are still the primary targets, need to understand how to protect themselves better. Allowing private sector, sir, that was one of the things he said. I was nodding my head. So when he said I was nodding, I didn't want my wig to fall off. I'm like, yes. It's so crucial. Again, as someone who's also in physical security, it's this same fight that we're having even with the military and all that, saying you can't just keep putting everything 100% on the government. Private sector needs to get involved. There's so many security issues we have across the country that private sector has solved it a long time ago, but it's just a challenge. So the more that the government can start releasing some of these responsibilities, the better off we'll be. Increasing awareness of available resources is also crucial. I talked about how nobody is reporting cyber attacks. Did you know that on the NGCERT website, there's actually a link where people, individuals, and businesses can report cyber attacks? Okay? Did you know that? Well, you've learned something new today. All right, so that's very, very key. It's very crucial. Let's increase awareness of that. Building trust. You know, the government has a long way to go in building trust among Nigerians. Already, we don't even feel they can protect us, physically protect, right? That's why we're hiring vigilantes and, you know, doing all sorts of things. And so it's going to take a while. It's an uphill battle, but they need to still try to build that trust amongst the Nigerian populace to let them know if you report these cyber crimes, no, we're not going to persecute you. We're not going to attack you. We need these incidents reported to actually assist with cyber intelligence, because that's where you go in. You go into that database, you analyze it, figure out what the trends are, what the patterns are, and that's what helps us prevent that in the future. So that's why reporting is very key, and the government has to do more, and anybody else involved has to do more with building that trust. Okay. Finally, harnessing the skills, knowledge and skills of local actors. You know, these two pictures say a lot. They say a lot. These guys are practically the same age, you would say, right? But then look at how one is treated versus the other. These are a generation of cyber threat intelligence analysts. The intel agencies and cyber agencies should focus on absorbing these our Nigerian youth. Okay? Let's get them into the ranks. Let's train them up properly. All right? Other nations are doing the same thing. Other nations, you name it, China, Israel, US, right from when they're like this, they're getting trained. And they're forming the unit for it. So that's very key. Okay, I just wanted to point out here the clarity on the role that the intel agencies have, and also on legislation. So priority must be given to the enforcement of cyber laws and legislation. Enforcing it, implementation, so you said it, we have policies galore. How do we implement? How do you enforce some of these laws, especially the ones that highlight this private-public partnership is so crucial. Let's enforce those. Also, cybersecurity threats to national security must be clearly identified and prioritized. So the government should not hold sort of threats to the sovereignty of Nigeria up there, more so than, direct attacks to individuals and businesses, the economy. So that priority really needs to be looked at. And then also the intelligence agencies that form the Nigerian intel community should also clearly identify and designate their roles. Now, it's so funny, so, you were mentioning a lot of things. I'm thinking the same thing. So I put here, this is the American example, right? So the American intelligence community, there are like 18 different agencies or so that are in there. But what you have here, with specific regards to cyber, each of those agencies have their roles that they play in terms of cyber intelligence. So the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, ODNI, they head the task force that coordinates all the efforts that identify sources of future cyber attacks. Then the Department of Homeland Security, they're the lead for protecting government computer systems. So they have their role that they play. The DoD, they're the ones that try to come up with strategies for potential counterattacks, offensive attacks. Because the US 100% right now believes that they are currently under attack. There's already cyber warfare going on, big time. So it's a matter of, do we attack back or not, which a lot of countries are doing. And then NSA, they monitor, detect, report, and respond to cyber threats. So same thing, they're more of the intel agency that does that. The FBI, they lead the efforts on investigating and prosecuting cyber crimes. So you see how each agency sort of has their major role that they do, but then do they also have their roles on what they do with cyber? So we also need to get clear on what ONSA's role is. What role is DSS playing as well in cyber intelligence? What is the FIB, or at least MPF, but they're FIB? What role are they playing in cyber intelligence? Same with DIA, even NIA. It's external. A lot of these external threats. So the NIA has a huge role to play as well. And Ministry of Interior, good old Ministry of Interior, right? They also have a lot that they're supposed to be doing, and I think it's time that we get clear on their roles. So in conclusion, The truth is today, the world today is what we call upside down. Everywhere, everyone is dealing with it right now, from inflation to just civil unrest, protests, diseases, you name it, climate change, weapons, wars, rumors of wars, everything. It's crazy out there. So there's so much risk and volatility in the world today. Countries need all the help they can get in ensuring political stability, economic strength, and security, okay? And if there's one thing I know, intelligence in general can actually help out with this, but specifically, cyber intelligence can help as that effective tool that will provide that decision advantage to policymakers, to leaders of the country, that would enable effective response and make sure that these countries can maintain their sovereignty and territorial integrity. So thank you all so much for your time. I hope you at least learned a thing or two. I appreciate it. Thank you.